I married my husband believing that stability was the same thing as happiness. He was kind, dependable, and deeply respected by everyone around him. Our life together looked complete from the outside. A quiet home, shared responsibilities, predictable routines. But inside that calm, there was a silence we never talked about. He worked long hours, came home tired, and loved me in ways that were practical rather than passionate. I told myself that was what adulthood looked like. I told myself wanting more was selfish. His father was the opposite of him in ways I didn't fully understand at first. He carried himself with confidence, spoke slowly as if every word mattered, and seemed to notice things others missed. When we visited, he asked how I was really doing, not the polite version people expect. First, I appreciated it. I thought it was kindness, maybe even protection. After all, he had raised the man I married. I trusted him without question. Family gatherings became frequent. My husband encouraged it, proud of the closeness he shared with his parents. His father always found reasons to sit near me, to include me in conversations, to ask my opinion even when no one else did. I noticed it, but I dismissed it. Older men could be warm, I told myself. I refused to believe there was anything more behind it. The first moment that unsettled me was small. A comment made softly when no one else was listening. A compliment that lingered a second too long. I felt my chest tighten, not with excitement but with confusion. I laughed it off and walked away, angry at myself for even noticing. That night, I lay awake wondering why it bothered me so much. Over time, those moments multiplied. He remembered details I never shared twice. He noticed when I seemed tired, when I forced a smile. He spoke about my husband in ways that hinted at understanding me better than his own son ever could. I should have shut it down then. I should have drawn a clear line. Instead, I stayed polite, silent, afraid of creating a problem where none was proven. I began to feel watched, not in a threatening way but in a way that made me feel seen. That realization scared me more than anything else. I had spent so long feeling invisible in my marriage that even inappropriate attention felt disorienting rather than immediately wrong. I hated that part of myself. The night everything shifted, we were alone for just a few minutes. Nothing dramatic happened. No touch. No raised voice. Just words spoken calmly, deliberately. He told me I deserved more than what I was settling for. He said it wasn't wrong to want to feel wanted. I remember the way my heart pounded, not because I agreed, but because I didn't deny it strongly enough. When my husband returned, laughing about something trivial, I realized something inside me had cracked. I smiled, nodded, and played my role. But I knew I was no longer standing on solid ground. A boundary had been tested, and I had let it bend. I told myself it meant nothing. But deep down, I knew it was the beginning of something I would one day regret. After that night, I tried to create distance. I answered less, avoided eye contact, found excuses to stay busy whenever we visited. I told myself that ignoring the discomfort would make it disappear. But the harder I pulled away, the more aware I became of how deeply his words had settled inside me. They echoed in quiet moments, especially when my husband was absent, lost in his routines and exhaustion. His father never chased me openly. That was the part that confused me the most. He remained respectful in front of everyone, careful with his tone, controlled with his presence. But when we were alone, even briefly, there was an intensity in his attention that felt deliberate. He spoke to me as if we shared a private understanding, as if something had already been acknowledged without being named. He started framing his concern as worry for my happiness. He spoke about marriage, about how love changes, about how some people learn to endure instead of live. I listened more than I should have. I didn't encourage him, but I didn't stop him either. Somewhere along the way, silence became permission. What frightened me most was how easy it felt to talk to him. I found myself opening up about things I had never said out loud. How lonely I felt, how unseen, how tired of pretending everything was fine. He never criticized his son directly, but he made comparisons that didn't need to be spoken fully. He made me feel understood, and that understanding slowly began to matter more than my fear. I fought it internally every day. I reminded myself who he was, what he represented, how wrong it all was. I told myself attraction was just a thought, not an action. But thoughts have weight, and mine were starting to pull me in directions I didn't recognize. I began noticing his presence before he spoke. I became aware of the way his voice affected me. That realization filled me with shame. Then one afternoon he said it plainly. Not crudely. Not aggressively. He said he felt something he had no right to feel but felt it anyway. He said he had tried to ignore it, but pretending hadn't changed the truth. I remember my hands trembling, my breath shallow, my mind racing for the right response. I wanted to leave, to shut it down completely. Instead, I stayed still. I told him it was wrong. I told him it could never happen. He didn't argue. He only said that feelings don't disappear just because we wish them away. That response unsettled me more than pressure ever could. There was no force, no demand, just certainty. After that, everything changed inside me. I started measuring my days by moments of avoidance and moments of weakness. I felt guilty even when nothing happened. I felt disloyal simply for thinking. I looked at my husband and wondered when I had stopped wanting to tell him everything. What scared me most wasn't his desire. It was my hesitation. The pause before saying no. The way I replayed his words when I was alone. I realized that the line I believed was unbreakable had already begun to blur. And once that happened, I knew I was standing far closer to a choice than I was willing to admit. I started lying in small, harmless ways. I told my husband I was tired when I was actually overwhelmed. I said everything was fine because it was easier than explaining the truth. I didn't fully understand myself. The distance between us didn't happen overnight, but once I noticed it, I stopped trying to close it. Part of me felt justified, as if emotional neglect excused everything that followed. That belief made it easier to breathe, easier to move forward without looking too closely at myself. I avoided being alone with his father, yet somehow those moments kept finding me. A conversation that began casually would stretch longer than intended. A shared silence would feel heavier than words. Each time I promised myself it would be the last. Each time I failed to leave soon enough. I wasn't pulled in by force. I walked toward it slowly, one rationalization at a time. I told myself nothing physical had happened, as if that meant I was still innocent. I clung to that idea desperately, using it as proof that I was still in control. But control is an illusion when your thoughts no longer belong to you. I caught myself imagining conversations, replaying his voice, wondering what it would feel like to stop resisting. That realization scared me more than the thought of consequences ever could. The moment I crossed the line didn't arrive dramatically. There was no sudden rush, no overwhelming passion. It came quietly, disguised as exhaustion and surrender. I remember thinking that I was tired of fighting feelings I didn't ask for. Tired of pretending I wasn't affected. When I should have walked away, I stayed. When I should have spoken, I remained silent. That silence became my decision. As it happened, my mind was painfully clear. I knew exactly who I was betraying. I knew this wasn't confusion or manipulation anymore. It was choice. That awareness didn't stop me. If anything, it made the moment heavier, more permanent. I felt myself step away from the person I believed I was, and there was no version of denial that could protect me from that truth. Afterward, I felt nothing like relief. There was no comfort in what I had done. Only a hollow stillness and a crushing sense of disbelief. I remember looking at myself and wondering how easily I had rewritten my own boundaries. How quickly my morals had bent once desire and loneliness joined forces. The guilt arrived immediately. It wrapped itself around every thought, every breath. I avoided my reflection. I avoided my husband's eyes. I became hyper-aware of every word I spoke, afraid my voice would reveal what I was hiding. I realized that this secret wasn't something I could put away. It would live with me, follow me, shape how I saw everything. I told myself it would never happen again. That this was a mistake, an ending rather than a beginning. But deep down, I knew that once a line is crossed, it doesn't return to where it was. I had changed the rules of my life in a single moment, and no amount of regret could undo that. That night, lying beside my husband, listening to his steady breathing, I understood the full weight of what I had done. I wasn't just hiding an action. I was hiding a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. And as sleep refused to come, one truth became impossible to escape. I had made a choice that would demand a price, whether I was ready to pay it or not. Living with what I had done became its own punishment. Nothing exploded. No dramatic confrontation followed. But the quiet that settled into my life was unbearable. Every interaction felt layered with meaning. Every smile felt rehearsed. I watched my husband closely, searching his face for suspicion, guilt twisting tighter each time he looked at me with trust one no longer deserved. His father changed after that. Not in a way anyone else could notice, but I could feel it. There was distance, then tension, then an unspoken awareness that passed between us whenever we were in the same room. The connection that once felt intoxicating now felt heavy, like a secret neither of us knew how to carry without damage. I avoided him more deliberately than before, not out of strength but fear. Fear of myself. Fear of how easily it had all happened. My husband sensed something was wrong, though he never named it. He asked if I was unhappy, if he had done something to hurt me. Each time I lied smoothly, convincingly. I told him I was tired, stressed, distracted. Watching him try to fix a problem he didn't understand made the guilt sharper. I had robbed him of the truth and myself of peace. I lost something essential during that time. Not my marriage, at least not on the surface, but my sense of who I was. I became cautious, guarded, constantly calculating. Joy felt undeserved. Love felt fragile. I realized that infidelity doesn't end with the act. It settles into your identity, changing how you move through the world. There was no clean resolution, no moment where everything reset. Just days stacking on top of each other, each one requiring me to pretend harder than the last. I understood then that some choices don't explode your life immediately. They erode it slowly, quietly, until you barely recognize what's left. I often think about the moment before everything changed, about how convinced I was that I would never cross that line. I learned that certainty is fragile when loneliness is ignored and boundaries are tested repeatedly. What I did wasn't inevitable. It wasn't fate or temptation alone. It was a series of silences, each one making the next easier. If there is a lesson in this, it's not about desire or even betrayal. It's about how easily we abandon ourselves before we ever abandon others. I live with the knowledge that I chose something I can never fully undo. And even though life went on, even though no one ever confronted me, the truth stayed. Some stories don't end with exposure or forgiveness. Some end with awareness. Mine ended with the understanding that one decision, made quietly and without witnesses, can echo through a lifetime. And no matter how well you hide it from the world, you never stop knowing exactly what you did.